Hi, Mystery Recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a horror sci-fi movie called Morgan. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins in a remote laboratory owned by a biotech company called Synsect. This company specializes in creating advanced, highly complex, human-like AI beings under a secret project named L9. The scientists in this lab have spent several years developing their fourth-generation AI creation, Morgan. Despite being only 5 years old, Morgan has matured to resemble a young woman. Initially, the staff used to take her on nature walks in the woods near the lab. However, Synsect's administration eventually ordered them to stop these unauthorized visits. Now, Morgan is confined to spending most of her time inside a glass room. One day, Dr. Kathy Grief, a lab staff member, enters Morgan's room to have lunch with her. As Kathy sets up the plates, Morgan stares at her hands curiously. Kathy mentions that she has been contacting the administration, urging them to reconsider their decision about the nature visits. Unfortunately, she hasn't received any positive response. Suddenly, Morgan pushes the plates aside, jumps onto the table, and attacks Kathy, stabbing her. Before the situation escalates further, two doctors rush into the room and sedate Morgan. The security footage of this violent incident is sent to Synsect's headquarters for review. To investigate further, the administration sends risk management specialist Lee Weathers to the laboratory. Upon arrival at the rural facility, Lee is welcomed by the project manager, Ted Brenner. He offers her a tour of the facility, but Lee politely declines. According to Simon, Morgan is everything they had hoped for, a hybrid biological organism that can think and feel. She even appeared to be a fully grown young woman by her first birthday. Simon shows Lee the footage of the incident but insists it was an isolated event. He reassures her that the project is still on the right track and that they are learning from their mistakes. Later, Lee visits the glass room to meet Morgan in person. For safety, she's kept outside the room due to the recent attack. Surprisingly, Morgan comes across as calm and polite, even apologizing for hurting Kathy. She claims the incident was unintentional. After everyone leaves, Morgan sits alone in a corner, reminiscing about her happy memories with Amy in the woods. It's clear that Amy, who treats her more like a sister than a prototype, is the person Morgan feels closest to. That evening, Lee joins the team for dinner and meets the other members. The married couple Dr. Darren and Dr. Brenda Finch and Dr. Louis Cheng, the head of Project L9, whom Morgan considers her mother. During the conversation, Lee explains that her role is to assess risk against the company's profits. To the team's dismay, she refers to Morgan as an object rather than someone with feelings. Lee then mentions a similar project in Helsinki, where prototypes killed 21 researchers. Simon interrupts, defending Morgan as far more advanced than the previous prototypes. Later that night, Lee and Skip share a drink and talk about the dynamics among the lab staff. Skip reveals that he and Amy had a fling in the past, but clarifies they aren't currently involved. Slightly drunk, Skip tries to kiss Lee, but quickly apologizes. Feeling awkward, they bid each other goodnight. Meanwhile, Amy visits Morgan's room to spend time with her. She disables the cameras before approaching Morgan and reminds her about the psychological test scheduled for the next day. Amy assures Morgan that everything will be fine as long as she remains true to herself. As an act of affection, the two place their hands on the glass. To comfort Morgan, Amy promises to take her to the beautiful Lake Navarre someday. This triggers a flashback for Morgan, recalling a sunny day in the woods with Amy. In the memory, Morgan finds an injured deer impaled on a branch. She gently caresses the animal before abruptly breaking its neck, ending its suffering. The next day, the psychological evaluation begins. Dr. Ben Shapiro, the examiner, insists on entering Morgan's room. Despite warnings from the team, he believes building trust is essential and thinks the session would be pointless otherwise. During their interaction, Ben is surprised that Morgan knows his name and the purpose of his visit. He asks her about her recent gloomy mood, to which she admits that it's because of the incident with Kathy. This reveals that Morgan is capable of remorse. Ben questions her further about life inside the room and how she feels about being confined. Although Morgan says she's content, Ben begins to provoke her, suggesting that the lab staff aren't her friends since they keep her locked up. As the conversation escalates, Ben raises his voice, pushing Morgan by questioning how she would react if he recommended terminating her. Overwhelmed, Morgan sheds a tear, her breaking point reached. Suddenly, she lunges at Ben, shoving him against the wall. In a brutal act, she bites into his throat, ripping a chunk out and leaving him mortally wounded. The commotion alerts the team, and Darren tries to sedate Morgan. However, she uses Ben's body as a shield and knocks Darren to the ground. Lee, observing the chaos, attempts to calm Morgan, but the lights go out. Taking advantage of the darkness, Morgan escapes, Acting quickly, Lee grabs a tranquilizer gun to stop Morgan before she can get too far. However, Morgan soon steps outside the lab and spots Amy waiting for the evaluation results. A sense of comfort washes over her at the sight of Amy, but the moment is cut short as Lee suddenly sedates her. When Morgan regains consciousness, she finds herself back in the lab. With visible remorse, she apologizes for her earlier actions. The team of doctors convenes to discuss her future and what's best for the company. Dr. Louis, the project chief, insists on terminating Morgan, while Simon passionately advocates for giving her another chance. Despite Simon's pleas, Dr. Louis remains resolute, leaving Simon heartbroken as he storms out. As the team prepares for Morgan's termination, emotions run high. Morgan has become a significant part of their daily lives, making the decision unbearable for many. The AI pleads desperately, even addressing Dr. Louis as mother. Moved but unwavering, Dr. Louis apologizes to Morgan before walking away. The team administers sedatives and Morgan drifts into unconsciousness. Simon and Dr. Louis leave the room, unable to witness what's next. Darren, tasked with delivering the lethal injection, loses his resolve and exits with his wife. With no medical staff remaining, Lee decides to take matters into her own hands. She attempts to end Project L9, but Ted intervenes. A heated confrontation follows, with Lee striking Ted and holding him at gunpoint. Before she can act further, Amy shoots her with a sedative, causing Lee to collapse. When Lee regains consciousness, she finds herself locked inside Morgan's room. Ted, standing guard outside, ignores her demands and threats. Meanwhile, Amy, Ted, Brenda, and Darren gather supplies, planning to smuggle Morgan out of the lab. Darren tries to wake Morgan, but the situation takes a terrifying turn. Morgan, now with a noticeably darker demeanor, headbutts Darren, grabs the lethal injection, and kills him. Ted attempts to stop her with a gun, but Morgan overpowers him, shoots him, and finishes him off mercilessly. All of this unfolds as Lee watches helplessly from behind the glass. Outside, Brenda loads supplies into her car and instructs Skip to prepare for departure. Sensing something is wrong, Skip runs back to the lab to find Lee. Meanwhile, Brenda encounters Amy, who appears visibly shaken. Brenda asks about her husband, but before she gets an answer, Morgan appears with a gun pointed at her. A fight ensues, but Morgan's strength prevails, and she brutally kills Brenda. Morgan, consumed by rage, heads to the residential quarters, where she encounters Kathy. Kathy attempts a friendly approach, but Morgan viciously kicks her, killing her instantly. Back in the lab, Lee climbs through an air vent, eventually escaping by breaking through a glass sunroof. Outside, she meets Skip, who is still in shock. Calmly and with a new sense of purpose, Lee instructs him to grab a weapon, hinting that there's more to her than meets the eye. At the residential quarters, Dr. Louis records a video detailing the tragic events. Her recording is interrupted when Morgan enters the room. To Dr. Louis' shock, Morgan approaches, kisses her forehead, and then suffocates her to death. A chilling act caught on camera. Later, Lee arrives at the residential quarters and discovers Simon's lifeless body hanging from a cabinet. Suddenly, Morgan ambushes her, and the two engage in a brutal fight. The battle escalates, and they both crash out of a window, landing in the parking lot below. Despite his fear, Skip tries to stop Morgan, but she knocks him down and escapes with Amy. Determined, Lee jumps into her car and gives chase. Morgan manages to crash Lee's car into a tree. Although injured, Lee survives and teams up with Skip, who claims to know where Morgan and Amy are headed. In the nearby forest, Morgan takes Amy to Lake Navarre, fulfilling a long-awaited dream. She expresses her joy at seeing the lake, shedding a tear as she experiences freedom for the first time. Amy, however, remains wary, hiding a weapon under her jacket. Lee, armed with Skip's rifle, enters the forest, determined to end Morgan. A warning shot startles Morgan, who decides to confront Lee. The two meet in a final, intense showdown, exchanging brutal blows. Eventually, Morgan pushes Lee onto a tree trunk, impaling her. The haunting image mirrors the dear Morgan once killed out of mercy. This time, however, Morgan walks away, leaving Lee to bleed out. Morgan returns to the lake and tries to leave with Amy, but in a shocking twist, Lee appears, alive and determined. She overpowers Morgan, pushing her into the water and holding her under until she stops moving. To ensure Morgan's end, Lee shoots her in the head. Lee then returns to Skip and, in a shocking act, shoots him as well, eliminating the last witness. In the aftermath, Sinsect's head, Jim Bryce, declares Project L9 a failure. The final scene shows Lee sitting in a restaurant, her expression cold and emotionless. She examines her hands, a gesture eerily similar to Morgan's, revealing that Lee too is a bioengineered being designed to follow orders without emotion. Wait, before you go, if you are loving these thrilling movie recaps and want to explore more epic stories, hit that subscribe button right now and join our growing community. Don't forget to tap the bell icon so you never miss a recap of your favorite movies. Got a film you want us to recap next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. We love hearing from you. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up and share it with your friends who love movies as much as you do. Every like and share helps us bring you even more awesome content. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next recap. Until then, keep exploring the magic of movies.